Welcome to an episode of Behind the Scenes, a weekly program unveiling the biggest political developments in Somali politics and the wider Horn of Africa region. I'm Sultan Mohammed, your host and producer here on HORUFADHI Media. On this week's program, reports emerge that the African Union mission in Somalia have killed a Somali university graduate in the town of Al Shabiha on the outskirts of the capital Mogadishu, as only a few months ago, African Union soldiers sentenced to death in Mogadishu for the killing of Somali nationals in Golwayn had their sentences reduced, which has led to an outcry from Somali nationals. Many are questioning, is ATMIS and the African Union mission above local Somali law? This is the topic on the program today. We hope you find this program very informative. Please like, share, and for similar content, do subscribe to HORUFADHI Media. Also, do subscribe to HORUFADHI Media Group's second channel, known as HORUFADHI TV, where you are currently watching this program and where you can watch other exclusive programs such as the African Weekly Roundup and Mahahis, among others. And last but not least, do follow myself, Sultan Mohammed, Suleiman Hashi, Yasin Abdi, and the wider HORUFADHI Media team on our social media platforms that should appear on the screen any moment now. Let's get straight into the story. Abdurrahman Farah, a young university graduate, was returning to his tailor shop when he was hit by a military vehicle of the African Union forces in Al Shabiha in Lower Shabelle on a Wednesday afternoon. He was rushed to the hospital where he passed away, unfortunately, according to the family. The incident resulted in a public outcry as angry residents blocked the main road after the ATMIS convoy attempted to flee from the crime scene. Now, according to witnesses, this resulted in ATMIS soldiers firing live rounds indiscriminately to disperse the crowd, which angered locals and is over and beyond the legal and professional requirements bestowed upon these soldiers, which was to protect Somali nationals, not to put them in harm's way. Now, speaking to local media, the sister of the late Abdurrahman, Asha Farah, said that his injuries were very serious and he was hit in the head. "What can we do now?" she said. "He will not return. He is our breadwinner," she continued. Now, the Deputy District Commissioner of Al Shabiha, Muhammad Hassan, said that he communicated with ATMIS command in nearby Afgoye. Following the incident, however, they did not receive an immediate response at that time. Now, ATMIS officially gave a response on December 1st, issuing a public statement acknowledging the death of the young man. The statement read, "The African Union mission in Somalia expresses its heartfelt condolences to the family of the deceased and has since set up a preliminary investigation to work closely with witnesses, government, and local authorities to investigate the deeply regrettable incident." They continue that the findings of the investigation team will be presented to a board of inquiry. Now, what that board of inquiry is, what it entails, who's on that board, is currently not known. We've also reached out to ATMIS head offices regarding the incident, and speaking to HORUFADHI Media, Deputy Head of ATMIS Fiona Lawton confirmed that there was an unfortunate incident and insisted that ATMIS have instituted a joint investigation with Somali authorities. ATMIS is also committed to upholding acceptable standards of behavior, she added. We also reached out to the Somali police force, and spokesman Sadiq confirmed that there currently is a joint investigation alongside ATMIS forces. Now, this is not the first time African Union mission has killed innocent Somali civilians. It was in 2021 when reports emerged from the town of Golwayn in Lower Shabelle that African Union forces rounded up and killed 7 Somalis in the region, according to the governor. Now, speaking to Shabelle Media Network, the governor confirmed that Amazon, then known as Amazon, had rounded up and killed 7 Somalis in the town. Now, according to reports, the African forces were traveling between the cities of Golwayn and Dano when an IED exploded, damaging the vehicle and possibly causing non-life-threatening injuries to the occupants. Now, following the incident, African Union forces traveled to a nearby farm unrelated to the situation, owned by the now deceased victim, Umar Hassan, rounding up a total of 5 individuals, including his workers. The soldiers also stopped 2 individuals that were fixing their vehicle on the side of the road and executed them all without question. According to bystanders and eyewitnesses, some individuals were immediately executed with a bullet to the head. Now, some of the statements made by witnesses are quite disturbing. Their corpses were dragged 100 meters from the location of the crime. They were piled up. Explosive devices were placed on the pile of corpses before being exploded into bits. We collected a leg from one location, an arm from another location, another leg from another location. It's routine for African soldiers to travel on this particular road every week to move supplies. They've always harassed, however, and even killed innocent Somalis along the way, said one eyewitness. We want Somali people to see this. Remove these soldiers. We want Somali soldiers, said a relative of the victim speaking to local media. Now, what did the federal government do in response? Well, by late August, the then Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble pledged that his government would protect Somali citizens and shall not allow any Somali to be harmed. Somali citizens are untouchable, he said. The Prime Minister launched a ministerial committee to investigate the Golwayn incident, composed of the Defence, Justice, Interior and Security Ministers. However, no findings were ever released by the government following alleged investigations. Now, Prime Minister Roble told the Somali National Television that he promised to bring justice to the families and bring the culprits before a court of law. And ultimately, the individuals were detained and placed under arrest, eventually being sentenced to death in a court in Mogadishu. However, the victims of these crimes have not received any justice because there's no compensation. Nothing can compensate a death of a victim, a relative. And simply putting people in a prison doesn't help this family at all in any way. And a bigger question remains for many Somalis, which is ATMIS and other foreign soldiers stationed in Somalia above Somali law? Now, it was October of this year when the Ugandan soldiers that were found guilty of the murder of 7 Somalis in the town of Golwayn I just talked about had their sentences reduced from death penalties, which was the law in Somali, local law, to jail sentences ranging from 15 to 19 by a court-martial appeal court, overruling a previous decision by a court in Somalia. Now, among the convicted murderers include captains, corporals, lance corporals, and none of these individuals will be now facing the death penalty, which is the correct legal procedure in Somali law, a place where they committed these crimes. They didn't commit these crimes in Uganda, they committed them in Somalia, so they must be held accountable under Somali law. Another element to this conversation about whether foreign soldiers are even accountable under Somali law comes in 2014, when Amazon were accused of gang raping women and girls as young as 12 and trading food aid for sex by Human Rights Watch. An investigation uncovered evidence of sexual exploitation of women seeking medicine for sick babies at what they assumed was the safety of African Union military bases. Amazon claimed that the alleged rapes were isolated incidents and described the report as unbalanced and unfair. Now, despite the acceptance of these crimes by Amazon, irrespective of what they described the report as, there were no convictions for these crimes and victims are yet to be compensated. We can also look at the illicit coal trade in Kismayo, a sector controlled by KDF units, has always been on the spotlight for some time, yet no action has been taken by the African Union mission. The UN found that $120 million is made from charcoal trade annually, with at least 10 million being siphoned off by Al-Shabaab. However, according to multiple reports released by various international organizations, the Kenyan forces heavily benefit from illegal coal and sugar trade that takes place in Kismayo. In a report released by researcher Ben Rawlins for Journalists for Justice, demonstrates the peak of the illegal trade in 2015. He found that KDF levied $2 tax on every bag of sugar and coal. He also found that the illegal trade brings in tens of millions of dollars for parties involved, and Rawlins went so far as to say the actions of the KDF directly benefited Al-Shabaab financially. The reality is that if ATMIS and the African Union want more reputable status among Somali nationals in the modern era, not 2007 and 2022, then the African Union must rectify the issues faced by Somalis as a direct result of the crimes committed by their units. The latest of which being the recent death of Abdurrahman Farah in Al-Shabiha. His family continued to seek justice. Similarly, the 7 Ugandan soldiers that had their sentences reduced remains a slap in the face to the victims who had their relatives' deceased bodies being dragged across the streets of Golwayn. There's still no financial compensation for that crime. The federal government must force the African Union and its leadership in Mogadishu to adhere to Somali law. They must accept that any criminal activity in Somalia will face the full wrath of Somali law as much as any other individual residing in the country. African Union, European, United States, Emirati, Qatari soldiers or units are no different to any other Somali soldier in Somalia. If a Somali police officer kills an innocent civilian, what happens? He's sentenced to death. So why shouldn't that be the same for African soldiers based in Somalia? Why shouldn't that be the same for European soldiers based in Somalia? Many remember the EU NAV force agreement with the Somali transitional government, which horrified Somalis when it came out publicly recently. And the agreement outlined that no EU or other nationality that was taking part of this force would even be held accountable in Somalia, even if they broke the law. In other words, the agreement allowed European soldiers and non-European soldiers that are part of the EU NAV force to be not held accountable in Somalia for crimes they commit against Somalis. And it's absurd, absolutely absurd. The reality is that many of these foreign organizations and troops coerced governments into agreements prior to the federal government. And these transitional governments in Somalia were not actual governments. They were puppet regimes installed that did not represent Somalis at all. It is time now. It's time for this government of Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud to take back control of Somali laws.